So, Milda, obviously, I got in touch with you for your experience with eating disorder clients, and of course, really happy that you can join us on the ACEDS team. And yeah, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, of course. I'm also really excited to be joining the ACEDS team. I have been a nutritional therapist for 9 years now. And since starting, I've specialized in working specifically with eating disorders, disordered eating, because this is also where I have a lot of personal experience, and I just felt like I could understand people who would come through my clinic door better. And so I did extra qualifications after nutritional therapy to really work with eating disorders as well. Yes, I think that's in a nutshell a little bit
Yeah,
about me.
that's great. And it's good that you can use your personal background and also how you've used that to get better training in the areas that you thought would help you best.
Mm.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about how that's helped you work with clients and how that's shaped the way that you work with clients?
hmm You mean the training in particular,
Yeah,
or
the
my
training,
approach?
your approach, and also, like you said, your personal background.
hmm Yes. So, um, yes, I find that when we talk about nutrition and nutritional therapy, a lot of therapists have a very specific way how they work, and very often they might be, it is very focused on let's make these changes. And after the first session, people might get quite a lot of changes they need to make. And I find that with eating disorders, it's quite specific because we want to be moving slower, much, much slower. We want to pace ourselves. We want to also have an approach that's so much based on relationship. So it's very much ongoing work. It's not just one session or two sessions, it's ongoing long term work that helps people to slowly change that relationship with food, with help them mm, um, regulate their nervous system, the work that's so much more about collaboration, discussion, rather than me telling people what to do. I try to meet people where they're at and then go from there. So I guess that's really, again, in a nutshell, but there's so much more that comes to that, to our work together, really.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it is not a one size fits all approach. It's not like you're just going to be giving everyone a meal plan as soon as they walk through your door. You're going to be listening to the client, listening to their struggles and their resistance before actually deciding what your goals will be together. Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is some of the questions that I have from people straight away. How our work is going to be. Are you going to give me a meal plan? Will you tell me what to do? Will I have to count calories and things like that? But
Mm,
it's absolutely the opposite. It's actually really important to let clients know that it is more about creating safety with food. So rather than restriction and rules, we're actually trying to peel that off. So we're
hmm.
trying to focus on nourishment instead, maybe creating more safety, more blood sugar regulation, more structure, but gentle structure rather than rigid structure. Just structure that can help people build a foundation around food. Um, yeah, so a little bit of safety so then they can start to change that relationship to something more peaceful than it currently is.
Definitely. And what do you answer to the clients when they ask if they have to count calories, if you're going to give them a meal plan, and so on? What would you respond?
Yeah, so absolutely not. We're actually trying to move away from that. And I very often say, no, you've probably tried all of those things before and they probably haven't worked. This is why we're here.
Exactly.
And no, and especially with meal plans, people think, well, okay, just tell me, because with disordered eating, eating disorders, people are often very confused about what to eat, how much to eat. So they do want that someone, this is I hear this very often. People say, "Can you just tell me what to do? Can you just tell me what to eat?" And really, this process is about trying to get the person to trust themselves more around food, but there are steps towards that. So I always say, instead of giving you a meal plan, what we're going to do is we're going to, again, meet you where you're at. We're going to see what types of foods you're eating, what you're eating, and slowly bring in some new nourishing foods, changing up the variety so that it supports your body, but it's never going to be rushed and it's going to be a discussion. So we might just add, oh, you're already having this. How about we add just a little bit of this and that to what you're having? And most of the time, people are very open to it because if I give them a meal plan and I explain it this way, if I give you a meal plan and you follow it perfectly, and then when we stop working together, you still won't know what to eat. So
Exactly.
we may as well just go through the process, discuss how and why. And, if you have certain foods at a certain time, that might help you balance energy better. But it's very experiential, the work that we do together, because I might say, I don't want to be the person that they look up to and say, oh, Milda will tell me what to eat. It's more, how about you try this out and report back what you felt and what happened to your day when you had this? And then they might say, oh, actually, I had more energy and I had less cravings at this time. And because I know this is the way that people learn is by experiencing something. So,
Hmm.
yes.
Definitely. You kind of need to build that relationship at first where you are guiding them, but then eventually
Yes.
transition into that place where you're trying to encourage them to be independent in their eating
Hmm.
whilst challenging the eating disorder thoughts and behaviors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what kind of clients do you mostly work with, Milda?
I mostly work with clients who experience binge eating, bulimia,
Hmm.
binge restrict cycles. Also, clients, I work with a lot of ADHD and neurodivergent clients because often there might be struggles alongside food, and clients with disordered eating. So really, many people who struggle with food with different uh, in different areas, I would say. Yes.
Hmm. Definitely. And it is important to realize there's so many similarities to the beginning of treatment.
Hmm.
So basically what I mean is at the beginning of treatment, it is all about the food, all about the eating, and that's really
Hmm.
important to remember. So I guess when we work with all these different clients, a lot of clients might come to me and say, oh, I have anorexia, but before I had bulimia, or before it was only binge eating. And
Hmm.
they don't realize at the end of the day, it is just regular eating that we need to start treatment well with.
Hmm.
And I wonder how do you encourage and motivate clients that those beginning parts of treatment when we are focusing on regular eating?
Hmm. Yes, I think these are really foundational steps. Is just bringing that regularity with food so that their food can start to trust their body can start to trust them around food, right? So I find this period actually rather not too difficult with clients because a lot of my clients might be in a place where they're very desperate to have some sort of um, people may often be in chaos and they might say, well, I just need something that works. And how I get them to start regular eating, I think it's just really honest explanation, giving them knowledge education, but uh, not preaching about things, but saying, hey, you notice a couple of signs that you mentioned, maybe this afternoon slump or when you binge eat in the evening after your meals. Well, we can explain this physiologically really easily, and this is what's happening. And when they understand that, they think, actually, it makes a lot of sense. I tried the other way. Let me try this way that Milda is saying, and let's see, right? So it's all just an experiment. What if we try
Mhm.
this for a couple of weeks and you do feel better? And most of the time they do, and they see that there's a reduction in behaviors. So, yes, I think it's
Definitely.
mainly education and just honest discussion. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, and honest reflection or open reflection. And what you also
Mm-hmm.
mentioned there or touched on there was that willingness to try something different, to step out of that, that rigid
Yes.
eating disorder box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most important thing for clients to know before starting sessions with you?
I think the most important thing is that often people think, I'm trying to think there are many things, but
So
most,
many things.
yes, but the most important things I think is to uh, not feel like they are maybe 100% ready, because sometimes people come with a lot of ambivalence. Will I need to change everything? They might be anxious about the process. They may not know how it's going to go. So I would always say just come anyway, even if you don't feel like I'm 100% motivated. What if there's still a part of me that doesn't quite want to do this, or I feel a lot of anxiety about the first steps? It's just to do it anyway. And, you know, very often when people come to the first session, I ask them how are they feeling, how things are, and they're quite tense and quite um, anxious about what's going to happen. And after the first session, they often say, "Wow, I feel hopeful, I feel insightful, I finally feel that there is some hope in, even if I've been struggling for decades, there is some hope, and I know the action steps that I can take." So I would really say that just taking the first step, and just if food is a struggle, even if they don't necessarily fit into certain boxes or diagnosis or anything like this, I think it's just really important to know if food is a struggle, it's
Hmm.
important to get help, regardless of where they're at. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say to clients that it's very normal to not feel motivated or confident about change at the beginning of
Mhm.
treatment. The reason why we're
Yes.
here is because you've waited until you feel motivated enough to eat, and it's not going to happen. So
Hmm.
part of it is that willingness and openness and trusting the process,
Hmm.
going through the motions, and
Hmm.
eventually you will feel hopeful or like something has changed.
Yeah,
Yeah. What
exactly.
do you think helps clients feel more confident about food over time?
I think one of the main steps is that when they start to apply strategies and techniques and they start to feel confident with each little step and celebrate the wins, they start to feel like they can do it, right? And
Hmm.
this is exactly why I find it so important to have little steps. And very often, depending on the person I'm working with, I like homework and I give people homework because I know through practice and practical um, exercises, people learn a lot. And it doesn't mean that they're very big, huge exercises after each session we have. They might be tiny little things. They might be, okay, let's increase water by 500 milliliters this week, right? Or let's try and have this too. Could be really small steps, but actually, when people achieve the small steps, then they feel, oh, okay, well, I can do this. Even if I'm not changing everything overnight, I'm changing the little things, and that's getting me somewhere. And if we have these little things every week, after a month, there's already quite a bit of change that's happened without people really noticing it. So I like to
Hmm.
reflect back and say, hey, look, it's only been a month, and look at all these things you've changed, or look at all these achievements you had. And that gives people confidence. And they can go, oh, yes. And it hasn't been so difficult to do. So I think
Yes,
that's useful.
exactly. Reflecting on what they have been able to do rather than what they haven't been able to do yet,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yes.
I'm kind of thinking, I'm curious about RFID presentations, if you've ever worked with any of those clients, because you mentioned your specialist interest in neurodivergent clients.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a bit of a crossover, but not as much as people
Mm-hmm.
think. I think can
Yeah.
actually be in quite different camps. Have you ever
Mm-hmm.
worked with RFID clients in your practice or any of those presentations?
I haven't yet worked with ARFID clients. Interestingly, yes, because I do work with neurodivergent clients, but I think people that come more often are people with binge eating at the moment.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
so although I haven't yet, there's definitely an area for more to get more interested in because I think it's
definitely.
also more prevalent. We start to hear more about those cases, right? Yes.
Absolutely. And I think it's 50-50 across our therapy team as well, of people who have
Mm-hmm.
worked with ARFID presentations
Mm-hmm.
or people who feel comfortable working with ARFID presentations because it is quite new. But it
Mm-hmm.
is one of my specialist interests. And I
Mm.
guess what's the
Wonderful.
same, as we kind of touched on earlier, is at the beginning, it is all about that regular eating pattern. But what's
Mm-hmm.
different is that the limitations or the barriers to moving forward tend to be around fear of choking,
Mm-hmm.
vomiting, sensory sensitivities, or even just a lack of
Yes.
interest in eating. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess in most of the presentations in binge eating and bulimia and
Mm-hmm.
anorexia, it tends to be around body image, fear of gaining weight,
Mm-hmm.
fear of food choices. So yeah, there's a lot of crossovers, but it is quite
Yes.
different. And I do find with
Yes.
my neurodivergent clients, it tends to be binge eating, especially with the ADHD
Mm-hmm.
presentation. And yeah, so I was just curious because a lot of people
Yes.
assume that ARFID is
Mm-hmm.
the same as neurodivergence, but of course it's very
I think
different.
I think it's a good it's good to separate these things and say, hey, there are some differences with this. And yes, I think just like everything with neurodivergence, especially in the past 10 years, we're just learning so much. There's so much new things coming out. And it's also an exciting time because we're finding out more. But when I started practicing, I would have similar binge eating clients come to me, and there was something very specific about some of their presentations. And I just wasn't really sure because actually I didn't have the training on ADHD at that point. Just a bit later on in my practice, I realized, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense because as we know from the statistics of um, the prevalence of ADHD, people with ADHD, 30 to 40% might have binge eating, which I think is
Yes.
quite a big percentage, but it might also be bigger from clinical practice. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Definitely. And it's that 1 in 3 who have neurodiversities will present with an eating disorder at some point in
mhm,
their life. So
yes.
yeah, 30 to 40% is definitely a large number of people to be walking through our doors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how do you find that you work alongside therapists in your practice?
Yes, so I've worked with alongside therapists since I started practicing, and I find it really useful. And it's actually really useful for people as a resource. I find that when they're working with a therapist and a nutritionist, then they're covering most of the bases, right? And I find that um, at the end of the day, I am a nutritional therapist, so I wouldn't. There are specific areas I would cover, and I do use some behavioral techniques and psychological techniques, but by no means I'm a therapist. And actually, there are areas where I would go, well, I might ask my clients, have you worked with your therapist in this area? What were the outcomes? Or might signpost saying this might be something to work with your therapist on, and this is how it might work. But generally, I find it really useful. And if I'm in touch with a therapist, sometimes we may, of course, with clients agreeing that they're happy for us to communicate, sometimes we come up with some useful insights, and
Hmm.
that can be mutually beneficial. But yes, I find, and if clients can work with both therapist and a nutritionist, I find it really an amazing resource for them. Yes.
Absolutely. I feel very lucky to be a therapist and a nutritionist, so I can
Yeah.
constantly combine that work. And I think it's
Hmm.
really, I guess, powerful to be able to use the nutrition in a therapeutic way. And it's not
Hmm.
always a psychological approach, it's
Hmm.
using that psych education and all the things that you've mentioned that you have to offer. But I guess
Hmm.
the limitations there would be therapy would be more for self esteem,
Hmm.
anxiety, perfectionism, going more in depth with those
Yes.
psychological barriers to change. But
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of it is nutrition. It's a big part of treatments and very essential.
I think
So,
especially like, oh,
oh,
sorry,
no, no,
like you
don't worry.
mentioned this, especially at the beginning of the treatment, nutrition is so essential. And then we find that later down the line, there might be those blocks that resurface that could be barriers to further change or full recovery, right? So this is
Hmm.
although therapy is very useful from the beginning, I find that it's especially important to move people forward a bit later down the line as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's also the risk factor for some clients. You know, some therapists might have limitations in being able to work around physical health risk factors, which
Mm-hmm.
of course you'd be able to bring to the page. You'd be able to identify early on
Mm-hmm.
rather than us kind of letting something going on for too long and then learning a bit too
Yes.
late. Do you find that you work a lot with physical health risk in your practice?
When you say physical health risk, can you clarify that? As in
So you've
making
mentioned
sure. Mm-hmm.
you've touched on hydration, so kind of like with water. Um, yeah, and I guess we might have a lot of people restricting beyond
Mm-hmm.
safety as well.
Yes.
So, for example, I have clients that sometimes I do need to actually point out refeeding as a risk,
Yes, yes, of
or that
course.
they need to go to their GP.
Yes. I mean, I absolutely do because working with eating disorders, it's essential for my practice. I cannot, there's so many red flags that can come up. So absolutely, I think just wanted to clarify. But yes, it's with restrictive eaters, it is especially important in terms of the refeeding risk, in terms of looking at what the BMI is. So this, I would say this is essential at the beginning to really monitor that for anyone, right? Nutrition
Absolutely.
therapists, this is the essence of whether, we can safely work with them. And very often I would email the GP or contact the GP and say, hey, I'm working with this client and this is the presentation, just to make sure that everything is safe. And perhaps even asking if they would be so kind to help out with some of the testing. But if it's someone who is at high risk, there is just no question the GPs will do testing.
Yeah,
And it is important for people who restrictive eaters, but also with bulimia, right? It's so important in terms of electrolyte balance and so on. But I do generally, I think the second session that I have with people would generally go through all the health history and just see if there are any other red flags. If there's anything else that they might need to do testing for. So that's really
absolutely.
how I work. Yes.
Definitely. And it's really important to let the clients know that this is a team approach.
Hmm.
It's not something that you can do alone as a diet as a nutritionist or as a
Hmm.
practitioner, or they can do alone as a person. And I guess
Hmm.
that kind of brings me to the theme for Eating Disorders Awareness Week, which is kind of building community, essence of what we've just been saying now, breaking isolation, because eating
Hmm.
disorders can feel isolating, not just for our clients, but for us as practitioners. And that's
Hmm.
why we love that team approach. How do you find that you help clients feel understood or less alone, or how do you help them understand that using community is a really important part of their recovery?
Hmm. I think generally in our sessions, I am the person who is there, who is also non-judgmental, who is also there, who has personal experience. So I can very much try and create this safe space for them. And I think this is, for some people, it's the first time they talked about issues around food or really have gone deeper into it. And it's really important for them to feel safe. And I generally find that we do have conversations about community support systems, what they have in place. And yeah, slowly we might think of some solutions of how they might need to expand. But very often I find when people start to feel safe in the work that we're doing together, when they start to feel more confident around food and safe in themselves, then they naturally may be willing more to open up to people around them. And they might be
Mm,
wanting to go into community more. And that is very much encouraged from my side. And often people might even discuss, there might be a loved one that they haven't told about parts of their eating and so on. So it's just, there might be those conversations worth having. But in terms of food, very often we also discuss those more challenging situations around community, for example, eating out with friends or eating out together
Yes.
with other people and commenting on people's bodies. So it's just really, I find um, community has a huge influence on how eating disorders progress or not, right? So I think it's
Hmm.
just also just seeing, having the awareness of what might be challenging aspects and also what they can do about it, if anything.
Definitely. And it's helping people realize that the people that they have around them also
Hmm.
make a huge difference. Sometimes we need to do a bit of a cleanse around people that
Hmm.
say certain comments or have certain beliefs around food,
Hmm.
bodies, eating. And it's really important to reflect on that.
Hmm.
And also important to help people understand that they can reach out to their loved ones and what they could say or how they could approach it. I guess on the other side of that, what advice would you give to someone supporting a loved one with an eating disorder?
Hmm. Great question. And there are lots of things that people around can do. And I often find that things that may look quite simple for people with eating disorders can be very impactful. For example, stopping commenting on people's weight and body, whether it's if someone is supporting and they may notice that they do it. And even if they're commenting on their own body, it's really important to start
Yes.
to see these comments and stop them. Just knowing that they are unhelpful, even if a person with an eating disorder doesn't say anything, they very often are hypervigilant to these comments and they will hear them. Um, Not commenting on body, but also not commenting on weight. Food itself, right? Putting labels on foods, good food, but bad foods, too much food, too little food. Just actually altogether trying to stop commenting on food, body,
Absolutely.
weight, and trying to bring the focus onto other activities, right? Perhaps doing things together, talking about anything but these things, really, or trying to have a more positive outlook on things and and also not commenting perhaps on people in general, right? Just trying to and I know that for many people these might be very habitual things to do, so it's just starting to observe, am I doing any of these things and can I do less of that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's such an essential thing to remind loved ones is that
Mm.
it's not their fault,
Hmm.
but there are things they can do to help. So, for
Hmm.
example, commenting on food, body, weight, shape, anything, even you look so well today, that can even
Hmm.
be a trigger. And
Yes.
rather just expanding to other areas of life like
Hmm.
hobbies, enjoyed experiences, that can be
Hmm.
really helpful for a client's mental states and focus at the beginning
Yes.
of
Yes,
treatment.
absolutely.
Yeah. That was really uplifting. Thank you.
Yes.
So, is there anything that you'd like potential clients of yours to know before reaching out or starting treatment?
Um, I think just like similar to what they might have, similar to what we mentioned already, is just that they don't have to have it all figured out. And yes, it's just taking the first step. And I know that there will be many fears that might be stopping people. So instead of going into those fears, just saying, getting curious about what if I just try, I just see if this is the right person to for me to work with, or I don't need to commit. I'm just seeing first, right? So it's just this curious
Yeah.
attitude. I think it's important, and it's often the hardest, the very beginning step. Yes.
Definitely. Uh, and my final question for you is what do you enjoy most about the work that you do?
Mm. I enjoy the entire process, but I mostly love when I know when I start working with people, then I might notice, the constriction around food and the many difficulties they may have, and how they might how they might feel resistant to some of the advice and changes. And then I see them travel through the process, and I see them starting getting more confident, comfortable, and they start to become so much more trusting in themselves, food. And I really love this transition because at the beginning, I almost know that I will get to this place. They will get to this place when they're calmer. And because I see it all from, from a side, I can say, hey, do you remember when this was an issue? And it's not, because people forget things that were difficult for them. And they think, oh, well, what's the next thing I need to sort? What's the next thing I need to do? And I might say, hey, do you remember 3 months ago, this was such a big deal? And they might say, oh, yeah, I didn't even notice, right? So I really love this change when people get so much more confident in themselves. And that's probably the most meaningful part of work for
Yes.
me, because I can see how they sort of open themselves up to their life, right? Their life
Hmm.
becomes bigger rather than smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really nice that we get to be a part of that experience as well, where we see their minds open and their
Mm-hmm.
attitude towards things change. And also the
Yeah.
surprise when it actually feels good to be fed back, to be
Mm-hmm.
told, look how well you're doing compared to
Yes.
when things were much harder than now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, well, it was really good having a chat with you about everything, Milda. And it's good to learn a bit more about how you practice with clients and I guess the attitude and the confidence that you would be bringing to their treatment and sessions.
Mm.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.